So, this photograph has been reproduced dozens of times in texts dealing with Dada in particular and historical avant-garde in general. It symbolizes a legendary event of which relatively few traces remain today. The Erste Internationale Dada Messe, which took place in the summer of 1920 in Berlin, has been studied as the height of Dadaist disobedience against the public, artistic institutions, the authority of the state and the Communist Party. It has also been studied as the widening of the destructive practices of the movement, which seesawed from individual works to the entire space of the exhibition. Finally, it was analyzed as the spectacular exit of Dada from the Berlin artistic scene of the 20s. But this photograph, which depicts the hardcore of Berlin Dadaism, may also be examined for itself, that is, not as a transparent document of a legendary event, but as a slightly more obscure device. Today, I would like to interpret this photograph as meticulously composed of formal, rhetorical, and ontological strategies forged by Dadaist subjectivity facing the temporality of the present. Just after the disastrous war and as the Spartakist revolution still tore German society, these artists intended not only to master the present by definition slippery and more than ever threatening, they resolved to defend the sovereignty of this order of time against the norm of the past and the utopia of the future, which had monopolized the history of modern times. If the Dada Messe photograph, which contained the principal artists of the Berlin Dadaist Club, in the Dada Messe photograph, there is first a division between improvisation and pose, distraction and contemplation. A median axis runs vertically in the depicted space, going from the tall and massive base holding a very small sculpture of Max Ernst, up to the famous mannequin of a policeman with a pig's face, suspended from the ceiling. Situated at the summit of an optical pyramid, the mannequin no doubt alludes to police surveillance which had increased since the war. Such simple and direct logic informs the same symbolism, although inversed, in the painting of Georg Gross' Germany, A Winter Tale, also exhibited in the Dada Messe. The bourgeois, occupying the center of the composition, is shown as leaning against the triple pillar of church, state, and military. Still more subtle is the symbolic device corresponding to the base of this optical pyramid. The elements which carry this device are the Dadaists themselves. The left part of the photograph alludes to a snapshot taken at the moment when Raoul Hausmann, Johannes Bader, and Otto Burkhardt, the art gallery owner, speak quietly, their backs to the works hung on the wall. On the same side, but clearly farther, at the foreground of the picture, Hannah Höch sits by herself. A real liminal figure, Höch looks outside the photograph, in the direction opposite of the three men, as if this detached and marginal position underlined the uncertain, off-center role of the only woman in the group. Now, on the right side of the photograph, the figure symmetrical to that of Höch is that of Otto Schmalhausen, which is shown sitting down, the hands crossed on the arms of his armchair. Contrary to Höch, he does not look outside, but toward the assemblage, the middle-class Philistine Herzfeld gone wild. There his look converges with that of the two creators of the assemblage, Georg Gross and John Herzfeld, standing stiffly next to his armchair. By contrast to the people talking on the other side of the room, Schmalhausen, Gross, and Herzfeld do not relate to each other. Their nearness is fortuitous and arbitrary, devoid of any motivation. Each is absorbed in himself, in the intimate contemplation of the assemblage placed on an improvised pedestal. The structure of all these positions and the spatial arrangement of the photograph as a whole bringing into play the themes of contemplation and distraction, of a stiff pose and a relaxed one, of the individual and the collective, work too well to be fortuitous. It looks very much as if the photographic snapshot hides the long duration of the formal elaboration, namely the time of the work necessary to the efficacious, to the efficient defense of the present moment. The main piece of the electromechanical sculpture, which monopolizes the attention of the three Dadaist artists, is a tailor's mannequin. The lack of a leg is supplanted by a prosthesis, and the lack of a head by a light bulb. Seen from a purely iconological point of view, the various objects attached to its torso allude to the closed world of a middle-class Philistine. The bell of his sheltering home, two broken knives and forks alluding to the uninterrupted cycle of biological conservation, a gun and a medal as a witness to his role in the war, finally the number 27 as a sign of the reproducibility of this anonymous subject in the world of modern rationalization. As shown by the denture replacing his genitals, the petit bourgeois, the middle-class Johnny Hertfield, succeeded in suppressing his urges, save for the urge to kill, as witnessed by the military attributes he wears on his torso and, ironically, his own prosthesis. This prosthesis holds the whole of the critical strength of the outlook of the two artists toward ancient and modern history. The prosthesis is used here as a mean to actualize the past, aiming simultaneously at the devaluation of a certain conception of 19th century history, historicism and normativity of the antiquity, and at the materialistic affirmation of the present. This prosthesis, thus, is the complex but hardly contradictory sign of the depreciation of antique spirit going hand in hand with the defense of a certain historical materialism. Through this ability to come to the service of ambivalence, the prosthesis exceeds the hermeneutical recourses of iconology and becomes intelligible only as the principal piece of the critical montage. The fundamental neoclassical postulate is shown to be that of an anti-distance come to complete the initial distance, the initial gap that would separate nature from art, the particular from the universal, senses from reason, matter from ideal. In fact, the prosthesis of the Dadaist mannequin is this anti-gap, anti-distance turned against itself, because it undermines from within the untimely norm of neoclassicism, a literal correction of nature, a remedy to the accident to which life, as opposed to spirit, is subject. The Dadaist prosthesis transforms the assemblage into a two-faced sign and into two distinct temporalities. First, that of an antique sculpture, partially spared by the ravages of time and exposed on a base in a museum space, and then that of a soldier of the empire, recently transformed into a warrior of the young republic. In this spirit, Raoul Hausmann wrote in a satirical text that castigated the ergonomic politics applied toward the disabled war veterans by the industrials and the state. I quote Hausmann, "The bearer of prosthesis is a man of better quality, raised, so to speak, to a superior rank thanks to the war." End of quote. In other words, the odd ties between the techniques of spiritual and moral rise and that of the material output were perfectly present in the spirit of the Dadaists. But the reference of the assemblage to the politics of recycling the workforce from behind the lines to the front, and from the front to behind the lines, continued beyond its individual limits. It continued in the very space of the exhibition, where the assemblage engaged a dialogue with a painting of Otto Dix hung exactly opposite. 35% erwerbsfähig, donc 35% able to work, is a canvas showing a grotesque procession of disabled war veterans. The assemblage of Gross and Herfield thus plays on a semiotic and temporal ambivalence between mind and matter, the classic nobleness and the brutality of the present. I would like to read this ambivalence as the expression of a principle, which I shall call the actualization of the past. The principle of the actualization of the past was sketched by Wieland Hertzfelder, the editor of Malik Verlag and the brother of John Herfield, in his text for the Messe catalogue, where he wrote in this text: "The past remains important and authoritative only to the extent that its cult must be combated. The Dadaists are of one mind. They say that the works of antiquity, the classical age, and all the great minds must not be evaluated with regard to the age in which they were created, but as if someone made those things today." End of quote. In other words, Dadaist artists inverted the play of the forces of history by subjecting the past to what it had itself subjected nature and the successive presents throughout history. By their process of actualization, they intended to show the inadequacy of the past to the present, its absolute and definitely inconvertible anachronism. Thus, they manifested an acute sense of historic relativism, which, at least since Herder, recognized by the smallest historical trace its own temporality. They noted that the past lasted a long time, and thus demonstrated an absolute temporal capital gain. The Dadaist strategy consisted in dealing with this plus-value, this capital gain as such, by bringing back the absolute past on the slippery slope of the present. They intended to show its inadequacy, though. Hertzfelder wrote, "Painting once had the explicit aim of providing people with a view of things that they could not come to know with their own eyes. Today, this task has been taken over by photography and film, which accomplish it incomparably better and more completely than painters of any era. Yet painting did not die with the loss of its objective, but instead showed new ones. Since then, all aspirations to art, no matter how various they may be, can be grouped together insofar as they have in common a tendency to emancipate themselves from reality." End of quote. The abstractions and the isms were those for Hertzfelder techniques of repression, developed by the painters facing the increasing devaluation of their art through technical reproducibility. Painting could no longer be reproductive, that function having been taken over by mediums essentially reproducible. In general, art had to put an end to its practice of spatio-temporal transposition, to its formal and temporal detour, deviations, through lost objects, and such was still the case of expressionism and abstraction, in favor of an ideology of direct presence and expression. But this presence had for Dadaists nothing unique or irreplaceable. It did not carry the heat of human breath. The hic and nunc, according to Hertzfelder, was the simple product of an impassive machine, and it was available in thousands of copies. By renouncing painting as transposition, Dadaist art also changed its temporal system. Through its given reproducibility and its claim of the presence, Dadaist work let itself be absorbed by the flow of time. Dadaist photomontage, assemblage, actions and proclamations did not find their thematic simply in the present, but physically participated in it. The very perspicacious Count Harry Kessler noted those in his journal the words of Hertzfelder according to which Dadaists made art only accessorily, because what counted for them was the pulse of the time, the great community in which they move. Consequently, they rejected all ancient art, even if the latter had a modern value in its time. Their works explain Hertzfelde to Count Kessler, did not even aspire to the value of documents. Since documents tend later to become sources, that is, something likely to put itself in the way of the future. Dadaists, those, anticipated their own future and historicity. There lies one of their differences, and not the least of them with the futurists, whose art, intended to contribute to the auto-formation of the subject by its total emancipation from nature, was conceived as a privileged means of immortalization. I think that I will stop here because this has... Yes?
You can stop here, Maria. You can go on for 1 minute.
Oh, 1 minute? Okay, so I stop here. For once I will be not so bavard.
We understand. Go on.
Well, thank you. I stop here.
You stop here? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.